Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever, however you are joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast presented by SFJ4x4.com. My name is Neil. I'm very sure. Scott's wrong. I don't know if our listeners at home, and I apologized because we're off to a banger already.
I heard it through the headphone and I was like,
I got to talk about it. I got to talk about Scott's stomach or...
Welcome to 2025.
My goodness. Scott's Gerbering in the microphone. Good gracious. Oh, well, mad scientist and indigestion expert.
I was going to say I was the only one here prepared at 10:19, but
apparently you were not.
I guess not.
Savage is back in the room. Oh, I see a Savage face, finger.
He's critiquing.
Are you okay? It is crooked. We're like, the ship is listing to the side.
Yes.
Well, folks, if you're listening to us in your ear holes, first of all, thank you.
Change is hard.
Happy 2025. Wow, right now we're you know what the value is? We're a really reputable company, I hear, based on building Jeeps, but maybe not so much in.
Hey, my camera stands fine. It's all the stuff above it.
Yeah, why is that?
So if you're listening to ear holes, you have no idea what we look like. Right now, I can tell you that I've got this beautiful bright blue, one of our new latest edition knit caps. So this is a beanie. It is the felt lined or the insulated version, and it's got one of these cool SFJ fleece lined.
Yeah,
not felt, fleece lined. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
a little bit softer.
Oh, is that how it works? Felt would I don't know. You were moaning about how harsh it was on a beanie hurt your head the other day.
Yes.
So
I think it was the old beanies. I don't know. Maybe the new ones are softer.
Geez.
Oh my gosh. The new beanie, the old beanies, the new beanies, either way, they're cool beanies. Anyways, I've got the bright blue one on, got the signature patch. Looks really good.
He's Team Hydro.
I am Team Hydro, Team Blue Jeep Crew. Woo woo. So that's what you're missing. And the camera was crooked. Scott's still a little uphill from Jeffrey and I. I don't know what's going on. The room's not.
He just
actually.
kept touching it. He didn't actually fix anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm joined in Grandma's Couch Studio with the mad scientist who gerbered into the microphone first thing. Jeff, who was the producer who doesn't want to wear a beanie and
was the producer.
Was
I got fired. Oh, no.
Did I say was?
He has a very
You were
delicate...
doing production things, and I was gonna say Jeff, who was messing around with the computer. I don't know what you were doing during the intro.
I don't.
Very
either.
distracting.
Jeff with the very...
oh God.
Okay, now I gotta hold Neil's mic. Jeff's forehead is very sensitive, is what I was trying to say.
So, anyways, good morning to Geauga Jeepers. Good morning to Daddy Jeep. Good morning and Happy New Year's to Geauga Jeepers again. And Keith Dart, good morning.
Good morning to everyone. Folks who are at home, here's the thing.
I gave you a different mic
Here's
stand
the
because
thing.
the last one was doing it to you. Why?
We worked in part, it's just literally just been a week ago. We ran the last podcast. We have not done anything that
It was last year.
why are we so rusty right now?
I don't know.
What is going on here?
I'm doing just fine.
Good morning
other than
to
my
Eric.
stomach.
I'm also wearing, you know what, Team Blue Jeep Crew. I wore my my Blue Jeep socks.
I
You know
see
how
that.
I typically like to wheel in fun socks. I determined that today, to start 2025, the epic wheeling season that is 2025, I would wear Jeep, blue Americana Jeep socks, red, white, and blue Americana Jeep socks. So I'm here for the party.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to be talking about fuel today. So the title that Jeffrey so cleverly put out there as a kind of an old spelling of gasoline, and this was in part inspired by one of our listeners, followers, who had mentioned LPG in a previous podcast, and I'm fascinated by that. But additionally, we're just going to be talking about the art of fuel and a little bit of historical context and a little bit of how our modern fuels work.
Before we get into fuel, though, please go like, subscribe, leave us a review. make sure you're sharing the podcast with other people. That is how we're able to keep doing this and having that support. But also coming up next week, we're going to have a featured spot with a guest appearance from a pre-recorded episode.
Mm-hmm.
So look for that within the episode. And if you're interested in those, you can actually see the full interviews on Patreon.
Right.
So
this special interest story next week, one that's near and dear. It's actually going to be my sister, who was pivotal in back when we were on the road a lot, and she actually was a pretty prolific and decorated off-roader herself, and she and I, wheeled and wrenched and did a bunch of stuff together. She's since gone on to a, kind of a more traditional career path, and she doesn't help as much at the business as she once did.
Did you watch the interview?
I did not get to see the full interview yet.
That's good. She
Awesome.
flat out points out, because I asked her how you with the business have influenced her, and she made sure to clarify that she is the OG Jeeper in your family.
Ah! Listener, she is technically older than me.
Yep.
So,
And she had a Jeep first. She wanted to make sure that was known.
I don't know if I agree with that.
So anyway,
Flexing. So much
Yeah, a
flexing.
little Jeep flex there.
Roy says good morning. Bill says good morning. And Kenneth is saying hi from Indiana, snow covered.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And just as a friendly reminder, you too can join us live on the Book of Faces or the YouTube almost every Monday morning at 10:19 a.m. Now, again, thanks to all of you, our viewers, our listeners. You allowed us to make some big steps in 2024 and create this awesome, dedicated studio to produce this content for you. And the special interest stories that we're going to be bringing, because of some of the challenges of that we do shoot live on Monday mornings, getting guests in with regularity like other podcasts may do, has some challenges. But what we are able to do is to create these special interest stories where we're able to do pre-recordings. There are, typically the interviews are 20, 25 minutes long. Our objective is to kind of condense them and air them on our standard program on Mondays for you in that kind of condensed version. If you'd like to see the elongated interviews, then arguably at this moment, they're available on Patreon. In the future, maybe they'll be available at a slightly later date on the standard airings and uploads. As of right now, you have to be on Patreon to check out the full interviews. Additionally, what I want to note, just as a metric before we get into our subject matter, Jeffrey and I were doing some end of the year, beginning of the year stuff, and you had an interesting search population, and you did top automotive podcasts worldwide.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that we are in the top 200, which, may or may not sound impressive to you, but when you kind of say that it is global,
Yep.
and that it takes into account hot rods and Bajaing and motorcycles and, lowriders, any type of automotive inspired podcast, that we are actually ranking in the top 200 globally of automotive podcasts. That's a pretty cool number to hear.
Yeah.
So thank you, all of you, for doing that. Your reviews, your, watches, your downloads, your streams, everywhere, wherever you're doing it, is super, super value. Thank you for being part of the OG Off-Road Jeep family and being part of this podcast. Speaking of OG, we would not be able to do what we currently have done without combustion.
Mm-hmm.
And so just kind of a fun vernacular. Sometimes you'll hear in certain communities, people refer to our engines as ICE. ICE, right?
Internal combustion engine.
Yes. Yeah. So at the adventation, the invention of ICE, internal combustion engine, we had to combust something, right?
Yep.
And there's through the combustion, we basically use heat energy or friction energy. We have this explosion, which then somebody long time ago, very smart, said, hey, you know what? I can actually put together all of these parts and pieces, this jigsaw puzzle, and I can create eventually through the jigsaw puzzle momentum, right? And I remember being a kid, like a real little kid, and breaking down how an engine worked, right? And as humans, I think we're oftentimes pretty, I don't want to say egocentric. We have a hard time believing how smart other people have been before when they come before us, right? We have a hard time kind of giving credit where credit is due historically. And so I'm looking at like how these modern engines worked. And I was like, how did anybody ever think that up? Because arguably we're talking about the early 1800s and steam engine technology, which
is actually
sort
kind
of
of
a fuel.
similar.
Right.
They both have pistons. They both have connecting rods. They both have crankshafts, that kind of stuff. So the recipe of sorts was there. They just had to adapt.
Right. So instead of having the combustion on the outside, heating a boiler,
Yes,
they put the combustion on the inside.
basically.
Right. I mean, that's the most rudimentary. And right now, just because I want to say it, because our good and dear friend Jason, the Angry Turtle, is his skin is crawling because I'm starting to tread into boilers. Right. He is a boiler certified individual, and anytime anybody has anything to do with steam operation, because he did work for the big power plant in the room. And his skin crawls a little bit. So I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of steam any more than just to say that we had this technology, and you took coal from the hopper car and you shoveled it into a furnace, which then heated a boiler, right?
Yes.
The most rudimentary version. Then we put the combustion on the inside, ICE, internal combustion engine.
Yep.
And we used, so it's real simple. We have to have a spark, right? Some type of energy that we're creating. Sometimes, right? We can just have combustion when it comes to when I say compression.
Yes.
We can just have compression, which is just a super cool thing. But you typically have spark, fuel, and air, right? Can't starve it for air. So that kind of lays the base groundwork for how people kind of started to arrive at making engines work.
So I think the first thing we should really talk about as we get into the history of fuel is the word gasoline itself.
Yeah, we had a nice conversation about this.
Yeah, I think that that's worth sharing with our listeners. The origination of the word gasoline. And when you do a deep dive on this, you can actually find a couple different accreditations as to where the word gasoline came from.
Yes.
And obviously various spellings throughout history.
Right. And by culture.
By culture, yep. Like the UK calls it petrol, not gasoline. But the term gasoline specifically, the etymology is what we were curious about. And what did you find versus what I found?
So, yeah, it was, I had found a couple more modern sources which just basically cited kind of a marketed word, right? So by the mid to late 1800s, right? We're pushing 1860s and a little after, as we got this byproduct that gas was already a word that was widely circulated.
Yes.
And it was, you had a gas lamp, you had
coal gas.
You're right. We knew gas as a society. So to say that now this vehicle, the automotive, can run on gas was an appropriate extension. But as they attempted to market it better, they said, well, hey, we're gonna say that it's gas, but society at that time, you think about the World's Fairs, you think about, each country was kind of racing through this industrialization and science and progress, that they love the idea of the suffix of INE, which is anything. It was kind of a chemically suffix, right? It's science related, or ENE, which I think you may or may not have put in the title. And so that was kind of like just means it's a chemical. And then ol, which, you know, is just kind of to pay homage of a derivative of oil, since we knew what oil was. We had struck oil, and they were extracting it from good old Titusville in Oil City, Pennsylvania. And so you had this gasoline. It was just a well-marketed namesake, you know, just to, you know, get people excited about the product and make it sound special.
Mhm.
And I thought it was interesting because I just kind of accepted it as kind of a universal. I saw a couple sources within the automotive community say like gas, ol, een, right? So, you know, just market it up. You found an interesting piece. I didn't find it right away. And
Yeah, and it was fun because yours is very factual. It's very easy to believe, and it very well could be
sure.
the right reason. The one that I found actually takes it and ties it back to ancient Greece, and the root word "elen," meaning oil,
Right.
is now attached to gas, and now you've gas from oil.
Right. And that would have been an olive oil, right? Some type of derivative of olive oil.
Correct.
And so, you know, it's interesting, but arguably it's, as I said, it was kind of funny because I said, yeah, it was kind of fascinating because it was just, you know, it's a totally made up word. And Jeff was like, aren't all words made up? And
Yeah.
I thought, okay, well, you know, you got me. You got me. I suppose they are. I suppose they are. So it's just kind of a fun fact of the day. It kind of reminded me, and I share this with you, that, you know, either kind of the origin of the Jeep Wave or the letter insignias. There's a couple different iterations, a couple different ways that people have kind of conceptualized or rationalized these things that we take for granted by today's standards. So gasoline.
So now that we know where gasoline came from, as far as the term, let's talk about your ice and what it actually originally ran on, because it wasn't gasoline.
Well, I think before you do that, you have to do like a 2-second, because this isn't the first time Lectric tried to take over this kind of industry. So back in the day, before electricity was everywhere, before the light bulb and all that kind of stuff, we had to have some sort of light somehow. And you couldn't use candles all the time. So you used oil lamps.
Mm-hmm.
And you had houses were piped for that. And you had lamps, and you had to light the lamps, that kind of stuff. And in order to make oil lamps, you had to have kerosene or some sort of oil. They did use like whale oil and stuff like that, but that was harder to get. So that means that you have to drill for oil to then get the kerosene to do that. Well, in order to get kerosene and then diesel fuel, you get gasoline as a byproduct. And back in the day, they used to literally just burn it off, throw it away. Some people would use it as a cleaning solvent, which, you know, surprise, people still do.
Yeah, so gasoline was literally a byproduct of crude oil refining.
Yes. So at the time of the first, and I'll say any engine doing work, because it wasn't quite car yet, you could use gasoline, and it was literally using a waste product. It'd be like today, somebody saying, hey, I've come up with this new way of doing work, and it uses plastic as what it ingests.
Oh, like a plastic bumper on a car.
Yeah.
Right. The work used to be a steel bumper, right?
Yeah.
And now we're like, oh, I like to do plastic. And the world kind of has a migraine because of that.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, that's a product nobody knows how to get rid of quite easily. So if tomorrow something was, it would be revolutionary. It would be awesome.
The reuse of plastic
I see what you're
bottles
saying.
as
To
a
be able
fuel.
to use something that right now we don't know how to get
It's
rid
a
of
waste
it.
byproduct currently.
And then
I
it
see.
was to be able to motivate the world kind of thing. So that kind of have to set the stage for what it was originally. Now, obviously, electricity happened in the light bulb and all that kind of stuff, and that took away the kerosene lamps and that kind of stuff from our houses. Now we have electric for all that. I just kind of thought that was neat how we have that tie-in back 200 years ago
Yes.
to now. We have electric cars,
right?
which is not a new technology, but we'll talk about that some other
Well,
time.
and the thing is, it's fascinating because how many people were entrenched in kerosene. There were big businesses who were dedicated to it. Infrastructure was dedicated to the utilization of kerosene.
Kerosene was largely available at most gas stations up until even recently.
I think they
still-
brought it to your
still
house
are.
or something. You know what I mean?
It's not largely available though. It is
Yeah.
harder to find than it used to be.
Yes, that is true.
I think it's funny because I remember kerosene pumps being at, like, I agree entirely. I remember the kerosene pumps at almost every gas station growing
Yeah.
up. And it was not our modern gas stations, right? We're so bougie. We're so spoiled by
Right.
our new mega gas stations. It used to be just a dive place with a little, single, little kiosk and, dials on the pumps themselves.
Well, something else I think is important is we just by happenstance are in where all this stuff sort of started. You mentioned Titusville, PA before. That's actually where the first oil well that went through bedrock was. And I remember as a young person going to Drake's well.
Yep.
Had no idea what it was. Honestly,
We just recently talked about Drake's Well because it's a
We
core
did.
memory as a
Yeah.
child.
I didn't even really have a grasp of what it was about then, other than the iconic building.
Sure.
And then doing the research, I was like, oh, I've been there. I know that place.
Mhm.
I didn't realize it was the first
Yes.
time they have drilled that part, but that is not that far from us by any stretch.
Sure.
So because of that and the infrastructure kind of growing up around us, I think maybe did you have kerosene pumps everywhere else? I don't know. Maybe it's because we were kind of at the birthplace of it.
I see what you're saying.
Did you know the combustion material that was used to get the oil from that bedrock?
I know he used the drill, and I believe, wasn't it a steam drill?
The liquid nitrogen was the combustion.
Oh,
They would drop cylinders of liquid nitrogen down in, and then drop a impact item on it because liquid nitrogen would explode on impact.
oh, okay.
Jeffrey has a vivid memory of being a kid.
Explosions. It was fun.
And that's just it's one of Jeffrey's core memories. Right now, there's
Jeffrey.
somebody at Drake's Well, like Historical Society, fact checking us in some capacity.
And they're
right?
going, nope, that's not right.
And
You remember
Jeffrey-
that completely wrong.
Jeffrey has this core memory where he's like, "Oh, things explode.
So-
I want to get involved."
So when young Jeff went, he heard explosions. I saw the structure and building.
yes.
I mean, I guess
Yeah.
everybody, it speaks to everyone somehow.
Yeah,
somehow,
you
right.
get to take your own part of it.
Yes. But anyways, we had this whole infrastructure dedicated to kerosene at that point,
Yes.
right? Because arguably
It was
you
a
know,
multi-million-dollar thing then,
Right.
because of how much demand there was for
and
it.
they were throwing gasoline out for the most part. Diesel, again, it's important to note Rudolph Diesel's first engine ran on peanut oil, not on a petroleum-based diesel fluid, fluid, I guess. So realistically, crude oil coming up out of the ground was, I mean, people knew it was special, but it wasn't the high dollar specialty that it is at this exact
It
moment.
was actually more useful because it was so common and so cheap.
Yes.
Which I know seems weird to us, but that's the other thing is it's still cheap compared to many other fluids or liquids that we
Well,
use.
and I have heard a breakdown before, right? And I don't take this as science by any stretch of the imagination, right? But my understanding of the dollar that it takes to create the energy produced, right?
Yes.
If I break that down and I get away from BTUs or actual, whatever, but the dollar to energy return is still the cheapest on petroleum or crude oil than arguably any other whether it be nuclear or hydrogen or whatever. Now, some of that I've been part of conversations is because the infrastructure is 200 years old.
yeah.
And so that's been done. Whereas solar, quote unquote, is, still
breaking new ground.
breaking ground, right? Wind power, we never really established huge, massive wind farms other than your standard singular windmill that, made feed in the,
Right.
on the windy days. And so, dollar for energy return, yes, the petro industry still has it as the advantage, but that's not to say that other industries couldn't if you were to equal the playing field of infrastructure.
One thing I did learn with all this research that I did not know, of course, I'm very infantile on my diesel use and knowledge, that diesel actually has more bang, volatility, or however you say that word,
Volatility.
than gasoline does.
Sure.
I did not know that.
Everything about diesel is better. I said it, folks. I said what I said, and I just, you know what? Our industry and infrastructure went towards gasoline.
He's kind of right. You know, the shaking is more, the smell is more, the bang is more, the is more.
Yeah. all true.
Diesel's also not as clean as gasoline.
It's more.
Yeah, there's more crud in it. So impurities.
Doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't have to be that way.
The gasoline from the 1800s though was full of impurities. It was clogging engines. It was very inefficient.
Well, and I actually wanted to kind of elaborate on that. The old vehicles, your compression was low, your efficiency was low. They would almost run on anything. Back in the day, they were almost multi-fuel before multi-fuel. As long as it was semi-flammable and you could shove it in it, it would kind of run off of it. So yes, you're correct, but the standards that those cars or engines required were ridiculously low.
But
sure.
Starting in the 20s, what did they do to fuel to clean that up some and make it better?
Well, so you have a problem with just by the fact of burning fuel that you lose some lubricity in the engine with your valves and that kind of stuff. So they needed some way of allowing that to have lubrication while you burned it. So they started putting in lead additives into the gas, and that was originally
lead makes everything better.
Sort of.
That's just how it works. Lead makes that. Lead made everything. It's kind of like MSG.
Oh, geez.
If you've eaten out anytime recently, you'll know. Or if you're a product of the 70s, 80s, or 90s, MSG was in everything we ate.
Yeah.
It just made life better until it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Until it doesn't.
Until you're poisoned from it. But anyway.
Back to the diesel real quick. Joe Harper's in the comments, and he says, we just need U.S. diesel producers to up the octane like Europe. It'll help us get rid of these complicated exhaust systems.
So, and I'm a huge diesel proponent in general, and I would love to talk more about that. And an interesting sidebar on octane. People think that octane is in the fuel, and
it's the amount of bang you get from the fuel
in comparison to octane itself. Octane is a rating system and not an actual product.
Yeah.
And I think that is a fascinating misnomer, because one that I definitely danced around a lot when I was younger, because you have octane additive, you have marketing that talks about octane. Right?
It's the amount of flash or fire response that something has. One will be less
the volatility.
That word
could be volatility, and to Joe's credit, he's exactly right that if we spent half as much energy on refining the diesel systems, that we wouldn't have the dirty filters and so on and so forth. But whatever. What do I know?
Yeah.
All right. So you were saying you don't remember.
I don't remember.
We were talking about lead and fuel.
I was talking about how lead is good, like MSG.
So anyway,
everything or talcum powder.
So we had to lubricate our valves, our valve seats, our valve stems, that kind
until
of
it
stuff.
gives you cancer.
And lead was
and then America tries to take it all. There's cigarettes and beer.
I'm just going to point something out. The Savage is going to come yell at you for interrupting Scott again.
That's true. That's what he does. So anyway, so that's why you'll hear your, I'll say 1930s to 60-ish vehicle owners be like, I gotta put my lead additive in my gasoline.
This is a
for
good
my car."
opportunity. Big Daddy government took that from me.
Yeah.
And he took my liquor and my cigarettes.
You've been holding on to that.
Yeah.
You couldn't wait.
I couldn't wait.
You needed an
I needed
opportunity
it.
to say
It's
it.
the
Big Daddy
beanie.
government.
It's the beanie
It's
speaking.
it's a conspiracy. They took my lead and my MSG.
Yeah. So the
They're
problem,
coming after my soda next.
the problem with lead in the gasoline is you get it out the tailpipe, and when you then want to use something like a catalytic converter
Yeah.
to clean up that tailpipe, it does bad stuff.
Yes. And handling issues. I understood that one of the things for the lobbying purposes of removing lead from fuel was additionally not just the particulate matter and the
Yeah.
aeration of it, but people who were actively handling it at gas stations, the pumper trucks,
Yes.
people who were using it to wash things, right?
Oh, it's-
as using gasoline as a
I
solvent.
mean, if you really want a sobering thing, look up the history of like that or all kinds of stuff we used to use every day and just put on our skin, and now we know that it's literally killing you. But anyway,
Just life.
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Sort
That's
of.
right.
Yeah. So we went from leaded gasoline all the way up to the 80s.
Yes.
And then in the 80s, we started using unleaded gasoline, and we changed up some standards from the 80s up through now.
Yes. And some of our engines had to become more refined and a little bit stronger in like valve seats and valves and that kind of stuff. The way we lubricate engines had to change a little bit to allow for that leaded gasoline to go away.
All right. So good morning to Nick and Linda Perry. But then my wife chimed in and goes, I love how Scott is so used to your guys' shenanigans that he just keeps going.
That's what
That's
I do.
appropriate.
Uh,
And honestly, this is not a dissimilar social. And I'm gonna get back on my diesel
boy.
soapbox. That when we went to low sulfur diesel fuels and oils, I mean that just happened in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
This is while it did not impact the kind of the mass consumer, right, the bell curve consumer, like leaded fuel did.
Yep.
It actually is a very similar. Hey, we understood that there were some unintended consequences of this, and now we need to try to kind of restructure how we approach the situation. Now, older diesel engines don't love the low sulfur fuels and the low sulfur oils,
But the new ones kind of have to require it. That's why growing up, we all had use unleaded fuel only on your gas cap and on your gas door.
right.
Yeah.
The most amazing thing, because that was so. I mean, that had just happened, right? And there are still, for our oldest engines, you can do kind of a fake lead additive to potentially help the engine, but realistically, not a ton of engines actually require lead additives at this
Well,
point.
at least not Jeep.
no,
Motors.
instead of lead, now they're adding detergents and trying to clean the fuel
and
up.
I was going to say real quick, what do you run in your flathead?
So that's another good example. It's a kind of a misnomer. You used to have, growing up, I'd hear all my dad's friends like, if you don't have the lead to lubricate the valve
Correct.
seats, they'll erode into the heads or into the block and they'll just destroy it. And then we kind of pull our head out of the sand and we go, they actually have hardened valve seats anyway. And you would have to run it like full tilt for 24 hours a day for the next 15 years for it actually to erode the valve into the head
Right.
a noticeable amount. So my 1947 engineered motor can just go run on regular gasoline.
Pump gas.
Now the only difference I do on it, and that's not because of the engine, it's because of the fuel system. I use ethanol-free gas,
Sure.
which we will get to, but that is for corrosion purposes only. That is not for because the engine cares.
Yeah.
Again, it's an older engine, lower compression. It kind of will run on anything. It doesn't really care.
I agree. And so when I ran the flatheads in the 46 and other applicable vintage junk
Yep.
that I love, I just ran regular pump gas.
Yep.
If I was feeling particularly warm and fuzzy, I might throw a lead additive substitute in there. But realistically, it runs on pump gas just fine for as much as we're actually going to use it. You know,
and anything in our restoration side that we most commonly do. So anything with an AMC V8 or AMC straight 6, they have hardened valve seats right from the get-go. So there's literally nothing for you to worry about.
Right. And the thing is that I understood that the lead actually helped at the combustion rate itself. In theory, helped make the volatility
octane of it.
Yeah, it changed the octane. So it actually made it combust in a slightly more efficient manner.
Yep.
Which, you know, despite the conversation about detergents being added to fuels, and I'll kind of talk about this in a hot second, that still is something we're attempting to, accomplish, is
To fine tune
and make it explode more efficiently.
Hey, James is saying hi too. So hi, James.
Good morning, James.
So another thing that is probably a good thing to mention at this point is also would hear like your high performance car. Well, now I need to run 93 octane, or I need to at least run 89 octane. Why do you need to do that? Well, the more compression you have, so say back in the Model T days, you might have like a 5-to-1 compression ratio.
Right.
My flathead, I think, was about 6 to 7 stock. Your racing cars, you're going to get up into the 10, 11 to 1. If you have a nitro funny car, you might get up higher than that. That is the amount of squish you're going to have before it explodes the propellant. And the more you squish it, the more bang you need to kind of shove it down.
Yeah, the denser it gets, basically.
So that's when, the more compression you have, that's when you need the more octane rated fuel to help you assist in that. And that's where, obviously you can play with timing and that kind of stuff. I grew up with people like, well, if I don't use the right fuel, my car pings. Well, that's pre-detonation. As it's actually trying to use, it's actually dieseling. It's actually exploding it because it's compressing it so much.
Correct. And when you have, adjusted, and we've had some performance vehicles where we have run into that pre-det, and where it is exploding, it is preemptively igniting based on compression, as you're saying, because
before the spark goes off.
Before the spark goes off, and it's a great way to say it. And so you run the more efficient, more pure, more. We're saying volatile, and I'm sure somebody's going to. The combustibility is high, right? And so you're doing that because you want a full ignition of the fuel. You don't want any of it to be left over in the chamber. And so we're matching the fuel combustion with the function of the engine itself.
James wants to know if this applies to green Jeeps.
It absolutely applies to green Jeeps with Hemis in them.
And hearse purrs.
And lots of hearse purrs. It has everything to do with the fact that he has to run this higher octane rated.
I wonder if we might actually be saying it a little bit wrong, because I bet you the higher octane, it's more efficient how and when it burns, where the lower octane kind of just is more willy-nilly. I bet you somebody would call us on that. So
I felt that that's what we were saying, but that's fine.
Say it a couple different ways. Maybe.
That's okay.
Sure.
And so the thing is, one of the misnomers, and I certainly. This is one of those old school things that I kind of still believe. And the idea is that even if you have a vehicle that is engineered to run on standard pump, what we'll call 87 octane gas, I like to once every 4 to 8 months to run a tank of premium fuel through it. Now, my argument, I suppose, is you run the tank of premium fuel, and it acts, because it is a more pure fuel.
It's more refined.
It's more refined. It has more of the characteristics that allow it to be arguably a little more efficient. That you run a tank or two through in conjunction with each other to help clean out and kind of take advantage or optimize your fuel system and combustion system what I'll say momentarily, right? Kind of the objective of the old school Rev tune-up, right? The old school Rev tune-up was you were trying to blow out crud, you were trying to force passages to open. There was kind of a method to the madness. Now, there's a lot of people who say that that is just absolutely unnecessary, that running a tank of high octane or premium fuel through your standard 87 equipped vehicle is unnecessary.
So I will say that back in the day when we had close to my flathead technology, where you didn't have a good efficiency and you did have carbon buildup and you did have like trying to get an exhaust out of a flathead. I don't know if you have, like, there should be a little diagram of how it's like the Family Circus cartoon. It takes forever. And because of that, lots of stuff falls out of it then. Where you compare that to a new motor, made today, the efficiency is off the scale comparative. Right. So I would say that with our new efficient motors, it's probably very less required. And as a mechanic, you tear things apart. It's amazing how much cleaner things are inside an engine.
Tolerances are tighter.
You have 200,000 miles, you take it apart, and it's relatively clean. You take an old motor, it had 50,000 miles on it, and you had to use a chisel to find parts in there because it was so carboned up and nasty. And that's because of our better oils, because of our more refinement on our gas.
The detergents that they're putting in
in the fuel, how the combustion is happening, and how it is the exhaust gas is removed, is all across the board been improved.
Now, as we kind of tiptoe around detergents, I want to talk about the fact that gasoline at different gas stations is different, but the source is all the same. So do you know why they're different at different stations?
Well, their recipe. It's like when you go to a restaurant.
Yes.
That's the detergents that they're adding.
Yeah, a chicken breast or a steak is sort of a chicken breast or a steak, know?
And this is a little bit of a mad scientist thing takeaway, but it's more important for a station that you love and go to all the time to have clean tanks that they maintain than the additives that they use that make them special. So if your Speedway gives you problems, well, it's probably because their tanks aren't the best and they're getting some water in there.
Speedway, please don't sue us. We don't mean... Wow, he called Speedway out.
Yeah, he did.
It's happened in Ashtabula. Anyway.
Wow.
Okay.
Back in the day, they did have that problem. But
back in the day, several different companies had water problems
tank
into the
issues,
tank.
period.
Yeah, tank issues. They redesigned the entire way the tanks are stored.
Correct.
Everything's different.
It legit depends on your town. In your town, it could be BP's doing that to you, and it's not.
No, BP just subsoil in the Gulf.
That one was getting sued. Wow.
We're coming for you.
Do they even exist anymore?
Welcome to SFJ 4x4. We're here to offend everybody nicely.
Has SFJ 4x4 touched you in any way?
I was gonna
we joke about the BP situation, but honestly, the fact that they had that and they're still a prominent company.
Are they though?
Yes.
Oh, Exxon. All right, so let's just keep shooting from the hip. Who has ruined the world today?
Just the sea turtles. It's fine.
We don't care about them pelicans. I care about the horsepower eagles flying from my tailpipe.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, right? So tanks, fluid contamination. The thing is, gas station and Shell and BP and Exxon and Sheetz and whoever, the refineries are local, are traditionally, you have a regional refinery.
Correct.
Right? And that refinery is going to take the crude oil and separate it into its parts and pieces, into its most kind of semblance of here's diesel,
parts.
here's kerosene, here's blah, blah, blah. But then the chef takes the steak, they take the chicken, and they season it, and they tenderize it, and they add the ingredients that is specific to their restaurant.
Yep.
That then gets sold at their pump.
And that it is true also, it's a very good analogy. You're going to have a lower grade chicken, and you're going to have a higher grade chicken. And it depends on what that chef wants to purchase and then charge for. depends on what level of the quality they
Sure.
want, and there's a buyer for every level.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. And that's actually interesting. There's a particular gas station. I think Jeffrey and I have talked about it before. I talk about it with everybody I can. There is a refinery in northwestern Pennsylvania, and it's huge. And I think refineries are really cool. There's actually a couple in northwestern PA, and I like kind of encountering them at night because you get this spectacular visual display. I mean, the refineries are like a half a mile long or
Yeah.
bigger, and they'll do burn offs. You know what I mean? And all of that aside, I still think all of that's really fascinating. And the lights and the pipes and the steam and the burn offs. There is a gas station that is literally nestled in the backside of this refinery, and it's like an old school gas station that I would expect should be dirt cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And I can promise you, it is always the most expensive gasoline anytime I'm out and
So
I'm
what
traveling.
you're saying, it's not the transportation cost for that one?
There's no transportation cost. They might as well have a hose hooked up to the refinery filling the tanks. And
Watch it, some opposite refinery.
I was gonna say, it's ironically they can't get it from that refinery.
Folks, I'm telling you, it's literally nestled as if it's like a keyhole in an H of.
I bet you that's what it was. Is there probably somebody was like, "You're not taking my property."
No, I hear, and this is just an I hear, that it is such a top shelf, despite the fact that
Oh.
it is the same 87, the same 91, the same or
So you have to-
88 and 93.
You have to get your gas with your pinky
You
out.
get your pinky out.
So what you're saying is that they are not even storing the gas in tanks under the ground. They're just pulling it right from the refinery.
That is exactly what I'm saying. That the contention is that it is such a premium, right? So to say that there is a buyer for everything,
Yes.
and again, the 87 octane rating is just saying that it's comparable to the combustion rate of 87 octane. The
Daddy-
ingredients in there,
Daddy Jeep saying quick fill in Warren, PA.
he knows what I'm talking about.
Makes me wonder, is there, I know that for like wine, there's tasters and do we have that for gasoline? Obviously you shouldn't ingest it, but is there
So-
somebody like,
There actually is fuel inspectors that go out and test the tanks for impurities and
Mhm.
Yeah,
water
water.
content. And if there is too much impurity or water content, they shut it down.
Sure.
And you can't, like, so if you go to a gas station and 87 is blocked off on all the pumps,
there's a problem?
there's a problem in their tank,
yeah.
and they have to remediate that before they can open that fuel line back up.
Yep.
Totes my guts.
And that does happen.
Yes.
And
Especially
honestly,
Nashville.
so one of my early jobs was
Listen to him
working.
having to axe the grind against Speedway.
One of my
How
early
has
jobs
Speedway
was actually
touched Scott today?
managing gas stations and truck stops. And as a attendant, you're supposed to go out every morning and every evening dip the tanks. And when you're dipping the tank, you have basically a long wooden stick, and you're measuring how deep of fuel is in there. And that measurement, whether it be 27 inches or whatever, calculates out to how much volume of fuel's in there. But when you do that, if you are trained appropriately, you can look at that stick and see some of the impurities or water content on that. And that is something that you're supposed to record if you notice that there's seemingly excessive water in it.
Mm-hmm. And I've been acquainted to a number of folks who have done impurity or water testing and found just massive, discrepancies in reputable, fuel providers.
Yeah.
And it happens. That's the challenge, is that it could happen. Contamination can happen right at the surface level and fall into the tank in some way. Tanks can become damaged underground. There's a whole bunch of things to that.
You can put ethanol in your fuel, which absorbs water.
So I think we got to keep moving forward on this a little bit and talk, so as
I'll be
fuel
honest.
has
So
changed,
the way we've been going through this episode, I think we're going to have to make this a 2-part series.
well, we'll talk about some alternative fuels in the next one, because I think we kind of keep going through with our compare contrast of gasoline and diesel of sorts. That
Well, we've got like 10 minutes left of our episode. so-
totes. So that's what I'm saying, is that as we go through gasoline changes, ethanol emerges just in the early 2000s.
Yep.
Right. So we eliminate lead because now it's bad for humans.
Yep.
and we go unleaded for a really long time of sorts, relatively.
Yeah, 10 to 15 years at minimum before we had anything else hit the limelight.
We definitely see more and more detergents being added in the 90s and late 2000 or not the late 2000s, but there's definitely the 90s.
That's when Shell came out with the V Power.
Yes.
And
you started seeing a lot of the stations use that as an advertisement.
Yep.
What reason to bring you in?
Now, I want to get on my soapbox for a second and talk about detergents or additives. And you may or may not have heard this explanation I've shared versus oils before. Okay. But I'm going to break this down because I think it's always an important tidbit you need to have rattling around in the back of your brain. If you have a quart of oil or a gallon of fuel, but a nominal volume, and I'll just use quart for kind of standardization. If you have a quart of oil or a quart of gasoline, you think that what you're buying is just that gasoline and you're getting an entire quart of it. Or you think you're buying 530 and you're just getting oil. What you're realistically doing is you're taking 100% of the whole and now you're breaking it down into parts. And some of that is going to be additives, detergents, modifiers. And so realistically, you're never actually getting 100% of that product.
And you wouldn't want to either, is another important part.
Absolutely. And so the recipe, again, we go back to that chef's recipe of gasoline and the same quart of gasoline. When you go to Shell, and I have no factual sentiment behind this, but you might be getting 88% of true gasoline at a equivalent of 87 octane.
Mm-hmm.
Then that additional 12% of that quart is going to be additives, detergents, and modifiers, which is going to, in theory, help that fuel perform better, both in the tank, right? Because they're businesses, so they've got to make sure that when it leaves the refinery, that it makes it to the fueling station, and other parts and pieces. It doesn't absorb a lot of water. If it does, it separates the water. So so forth, cleaning the carbon out like we talked about. So a bunch of those things. So you only ever have a percentage of actual gasoline in that volume quantity.
And since you're bringing up Shell specifically, when they brought out their V Power, which was their premium fuel, the percentages aren't factual here, but
Correct.
You're saying, let's just say 87 was 88% gasoline and the rest was detergents. Their V Power would be more like 67% and the rest would be detergents and additives because they were toting a higher detergent to clean your engine and keep it performing better.
I think I appreciate you bringing that up because that's the thing. I don't know if somebody else or another fueling station had done this before them, but I certainly remember Shell being the company who wanted to talk about it the most or the loudest, at least for the general consumer.
So Shell was actually the gas station that I worked for. So when V-Power came out, we actually had the little displays with the pistons and everything and showing the carbon versus the V-Power with no carbon and how clean and shiny they were and all these different things. And it was actually kind of cool to see. They had the fuel in there, so you could see like a sample of the fuel, the color of it, and the clarity of it, things like that.
It
was a huge talking point for a gas station.
Correct, correct. And I think it's interesting because at that level, I think there's a disconnect between consumers and the suppliers in the sense that the suppliers understand that the engines actually don't need a gallon of gas, right?
Yes,
right.
That it actually can run on less actual combustive materials, right? We were using this highly, quote unquote, highly refined, but it actually wasn't, or it had a saturation of actual fuel. And then the suppliers were like, actually, these engines can run on less, which then brings me to ethanol, right?
Yep.
And so in the quote unquote fuel crisis of the Great Recession, we as a nation turned to corn.
Well, plus we wanted something to be renewable. And ethanol, because it's derived from plant-based material, you can grow more of that and keep making it.
It felt good at first.
It did feel good at first.
What are some challenges that ethanol has been found to bring, though?
Well,
Everything.
it's touched me with
Everything.
my carburetor. Those old aluminum bodies were not intended to have anything corrosive or
Well, ethanol burns hotter as part of the problem.
yes.
So that's why, and this is a confusing piece. If you ever hear or see some race car guys
Yes.
actually like ethanol,
Yeah.
Yes. And they're
um,
actually upset that they can't get more pure ethanol
yes,
because so you get more bang out of it. So therefore you can play with your timing and that kind of stuff, and you can derive more power out of it. The problem is that when you have a motor set up for that, you actually burn more of it quicker. So your tank is going to last you less. But your motor is more protected when it's tuned that way. So there's literally people out there tuning an ethanol tune and a 93 tune.
Yep.
And your horsepowers are less on the 93 tune than the ethanol
Then
tune.
the ethanol tune.
The problem is that you can't always get the ethanol because
You
there's not.
can't always
Well,
get
and then-
what you want.
Ethanol has a high water absorption rate,
Yes.
and then it also has what's called phase separation, so it doesn't mix and stay mixed well with
Yep.
gasoline,
Yep.
especially at higher levels.
Yep.
And it ate certain plastics and rubber composites in the beginning.
Yep.
Yes.
And so there were some unintended consequences, once again, of adding, right? So we have this history through the discovery of oil,
Yep.
of going, what is this good for, and how can we stretch it, and how can we make it better? And it gets a little cattywampus in the process, but we get to this point where we add ethanol, then we realize that there are some unintended consequences. They actually start making flex fuel vehicles. That was another big talking point, another big marketing thing. My wife and I ran out and bought a flex fuel vehicle.
Yep.
Not because we had to jump on the bandwagon, but because I was like, well, I'd rather insulate myself now.
Joe O'Brien just brought up E88 gas.
Yep.
And so, and honestly, while my wife and I maintained that flex fuel vehicle up until just a couple of years ago, I felt perfectly tickled to run E88 in
Well, it's something that
it specifically.
I've been kind of surprised because I know the difference between on a flex fuel LS platform versus a not. You literally have different injectors, you have different fuel rails, you have a different fuel pipe, all in that flex fuel vehicle. But now we go to today, like my 21 Gladiator, it literally says on the gas door, do not use 88. You put 87 in it, do not use.
It's the new leaded, unleaded warnings.
Yes.
Yep.
Which kind of crazy because we all lived the flex fuel. GM was on that hill for a long time where they had the badge on the back. They completely redesigned their fuel systems, having dose systems.
Yep.
And now we're back to the point where people, like Stellantis is saying, please don't put 88 in your vehicle.
Yeah, and the challenge I have as a consumer is E88 is price point wise is really appealing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so you're sitting there and you're looking at the pump going, how bad could this really be? Now, here's the challenge, and I say this boldly. I hold no qualms. I pull no strings to say we make bad choices for you all the time. So we do things to ourselves. We experiment. I look at it just like an average consumer and I go, how bad could this be? So that you don't have to, so that I can sit here and go, here are the unintended, here are your problems, right? This is what you did not know was going to happen. And so I've absolutely sat there. I stared at the pump and I go, how bad can this absolutely hurt my wife's, JL with the 3.6 in it, which is arguably the same thing.
I definitely, when Sheetz was running the promo it was like what, $1.99 or something like that,
Or less, yeah.
or less. It was stupid.
It was stupid.
I definitely did a couple tanks, but I would go regular fuel. Okay, I'll use the E88, and then regular fuel.
So here's a question.
So that I wasn't going just straight on that and ruining the engine.
Did you get any less mileage on the 88?
I did not.
So I would tell you that I probably did.
My dad absolutely said he did. I did not notice a discernible
what
difference.
I would expect. The more ethanol you get, the less mile per gallon you're going to get.
If the vehicle isn't engineered for it. Again, because theoretically, if you had a tune for ethanol, then you're supposed to get more bang for the buck.
So I was just going to say, I'm going to clarify. So when I say I didn't get less mileage, I didn't get less mileage for my dollar. So the miles per gallon goes down slightly.
It takes more ethanol to go the same distance because you need more of it.
Correct. But it's so much cheaper that when you count the difference there, you're either breaking even or it's coming slightly ahead.
All right. So Jeffrey's reiteration of what he just said is exactly how I felt.
Yep.
Is that, yes, my mileage factually went down by just the generic monitoring on the vehicle itself.
Yep. Which is what I would expect.
But the same amount of money that I spent, if I would have doubled that in your standard, 87 octane, which is what we would normally run, my mileage was arguably comparable.
Yes. So Joe O'Brien is saying, tell everyone what the E88 did to his. And if I remember right, Joe ran straight E88 for a length of time.
So, Joe, whether he did or whether he didn't, he definitely said, hey, he had access to an E88. He was not against it. It totally deteriorated everything.
Yes.
Injectors, O-rings.
And that goes back to Scott's talking point about it is not actually good because it is a separate system and a separate design.
Yes. And ultimately what this is going to come down to, folks, and I think we leave you on this because we have to wrap this up, but it was a great session. I think we'll talk about more fuels next week. What it comes down to are the composite materials that the manufacturer is using in their engine design, right? Fuel system, vehicle, overall automotive design. So if GM says, hey, our recipe, the plastics, the rubbers, the so on and so forth, composite materials, or the metallurgy, or whatever we're using within the engine.
Pretty easy. Flex Fuel 5.3, the crossover tube is metal. It's stainless steel on a Flex Fuel. On a standard fuel, it's steel. Right there kind of gives it to you. So if you have the non-flex and you put ethanol in it, it's going to rot out that steel
standard
pipe.
Mild steel pipe versus the stainless and the
where
Flex
the stainless, they did that because they knew they were going to have corrosive material going through it. So they don't want you back in the warranty period, so they're going to use stainless steel. Stainless is expensive.
Correct.
So there's a reason they did that.
Right. It's interesting for me because it is about manufacturers and businesses making decisions which then eventually trickle down to the consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes I think the consumers, as much as we try to be informed, we're like, well, that E88 looks really tempting. And Chrysler's going, yeah, but we did not retool all of our O-rings or the actual hammerhead in the injector to ensure that you can run it. So maybe once or twice you can get away with it, but sustained use, no dice.
Bad.
Or you can always just be the outlier. I talk factually. My wife's engine, my wife's Jeep needs an engine. I think it's just an outlier. 3.6s are really robust vehicles. Why the head or head gasket went, I have no answer. I'm just the unlucky person within that specific, fail point. So
First model year.
we got to leave you on that note, but we'll be back to talk more about fuels next week.
I want to leave it with one interesting stat on fuel impurities.
Okay.
Studies estimate that 20 to 30% of vehicles experience performance issues due to fuel impurities.
You too might experience inefficiencies.
You started it off. I thought it was going to be great. It was going to be that epic commercial style, and then you just failed.
I don't have any performance problems, so I must not due to my fuel impurities.
Oh, geez.
Folks, on that note, it's been a banger. Wow, that went by really fast. If you do care to hear about what's happening in our own personal lives, make sure you stay tuned past the credits, and you'll hear a little bit about that. I'm sure there'll be something interesting for that. Until then, Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Do I have something to talk about?
I don't know.
I don't even know.
I don't know. I mean, we had New Year's Eve. We had a weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So there's plenty of things that could have gone on.
So for me personally, I was able to, after we demolished the building with all the Jeeps and ran out of gas and all that fun stuff, I was able to continue to take things apart. And at this point, the building is down.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
I know how jealous.
Down.
He's singing to avoid his jealousy of not being able to winch that building with us.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't invited.
I was trying to let you have family
Well,
time.
fine, whatever. No, I just know I wasn't invited.
So anywho,
Well, I didn't even have the opportunity to
decline.
decline. Thank you.
because he wouldn't have.
There was no RSVP.
He knows how
issued.
to overextend himself.
Mm-hmm.
14 ways a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Scott literally said, "I don't want Neil to come because I want him to spend his time with family that he so needs to do."
Which was I
but
get
as
it.
a last resort, if we needed it,
I
he
would
was
have been
going
there.
to
He was
call
our
you.
lunch
I would have
pen.
been there. I would have been there.
So the other, I
With
think,
plenty of hillbilly ingenuity.
100%.
You should have seen how much we had.
But we were, able to kind of get that taken care of. Jeff was able to rip many beams out of the building with his winch,
One at a time.
one at a time, and the thing continued not to fall.
We
Just
could,
mystified
I
us
could not believe how
how
structurally
weak
sound
but
it was.
strong at the same time. It was. But in any regard, I had, over the course of tearing it apart, I've had lots of people come and assist, and that's one thing. You assisted.
No, that's not my words, man.
What?
All right, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I'm interrupting you. Because of this and the constant conversation that we've had about these metal buildings, the Book of Faces is target marketing me with metal building and carport structures page, right? And I'm
Triggered.
getting this, right? It is
Triggered.
simply because of what it's hearing in my pocket at work. I have not personally gone and looked
I
them
was
up.
gonna say, we
I
built
have-
you a wooden structure. You wouldn't be looking for metal.
and we built a beautiful wooden structure months ago.
Right.
I'm building a house months ago, not metal buildings, carports, and whatever else word this
Yeah.
is. And it's these pages where guys are buying these buildings and then modifying them, you
Yeah.
know? And it's just strictly because of the algorithm that's listening in our, supercomputer in our pockets.
Yep.
And I'm looking at the most recently, this one guy was in Michigan, and I just like right in the snow load, like similar
Yep.
to us, and was so proud of his building. And he used foam board to do his insulating. And he was like,
Triggered.
"Don't worry, I left the gap between the wall, so there's zero condensation, and because I didn't spray foam it, because it was a third the price of spray foam, I've protected my 20-year warranty." And I thought to myself, the warranty is only good as the company that's issuing it. And we know factually from your experience, and we've talked about this for a few years, the individuals you're buying this building for are almost like transient carnies at this point.
I mean, just
Go ahead.
well, first I was trying to give everyone kudos for coming out and helping, because
Yeah,
including
sorry.
Neil did come out and
Yeah,
help.
that's what you did.
And so any which way, but within a 3-mile radius of my house, there is no less than 3 or 4 of these buildings that are all flat.
Yes.
My drive to work, there's at least 10.
Yes.
At least 10.
It blows my mind. Now, I'm proud. Mine's the first one that's down.
Sure.
And not, I'm actually surprised how many people haven't even touched them,
100%.
because they're a safety hazard.
But I'm telling you, it's because they called their insurance agency just like you did, and they said, "Well, if there's snow on the roof, we can't do anything about it." And
Yeah.
those people didn't
Just-
have the whereabouts to
just
do
accepted
what
it.
you've done. Yes.
Yeah. And that whole journey has been a complete cluster, which we won't go into this.
Sure.
But I got stuff to talk to you guys about later.
Yeah.
But the warranty part of it that you were talking about, it kind of doesn't matter because every single one of those buildings puts a disclaimer,
Yep.
not warranted against weather.
Yes.
That's what
Every single one of them.
That's what I'm saying exactly. Is that the warranty is such a sham, and
I don't care if you buy the extra snow load rating bracing that they
Yep.
try to sell you. It doesn't cover warranty.
And the problem specifically with a number of the retailers, because I'm into this stuff, right? It's an interest of mine. These retailers, oftentimes, they're not institutional retailers of these buildings. They open for a few years under one name. They might move lots from left to right of the main highway. They open up under another name. You know, they're constantly like the shell game
Yep.
of retailing these affordable buildings.
Oh, they have every out possible.
Yep.
Yes,
For sure. But trying to look at the glass half full.
sure.
I had lots of help. We've gotten it handled. I did purchase my tractor, so I've been tractoring all over the place.
I literally said to Neil while you were off last week, I was like, as much as you hated the snow a
Yep.
week ago, now that you have the tractor, you've got to be enjoying the snow because you're out there playing in it.
I'm jealous of his cab
Mhm.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
because it is very cold, and had to go change my clothes because I was
Tractoring.
doing it tractoring, and I was in a snowstorm, and snow was on me,
Mm-hmm.
so my jacket was soaked, my pants were soaked.
Mm-hmm.
But
But you had
Oh,
fun doing
I
it.
have never had such an efficient snow removal machine in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
I now look at my four-wheeler and go, what's that for? Like, why would I really want to use a plow when I can scoop it the same and then I can put it somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to. I mean, I spent years packing snow into places I really didn't want snow, and now it just looks so nice. Like the kids were like, "Can you make us a slide or a hill to slide down?"
Yep.
Yep, no problem. I'll put it right there.
Yep.
I spent yesterday, went out. I didn't have flannel on, but I should have. I got my 12-inch battery chainsaw and I cut down a tree that had started to fall down. Drug that out back to the tractor. Scraped.
Most people would have just called it a branch stuck in the
I was
ground.
going to say there was a branch.
Well,
It was-
no. I had to. It was legit a 12 to 14-inch tree,
Okay.
so it
Oh,
took
all right.
way too long. I kept thinking this is why I need a
was a big
Milwaukee
branch.
saw. But anyway, I was able to scrape the back pad of my garage that I did not appropriately maintain, much to my wife's dismay.
Mhm.
And now that I don't have a building, I need to be creative where I put things. So she generously let me put the tractor in the garage, and her Jeep came out. It was in there for like 2 seconds. So now I needed somewhere to put it. So I cleaned everything off, shoved everything, moved stuff inappropriately with the bucket, scraped that all off, and then put the Jeep behind the garage. So I was like, I felt so
Snowflakes
accomplished.
out in the snow, huh?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Felt so accomplished. I was able to get so much done in such a short
Yeah.
amount of time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know,
Awesome.
so
What's the ideal game plan? How soon are you going to have a new building?
well, that depends on when I get
Let's say Dream World.
Dream
In your
World?
Dream World, when are we building this new building?
soon as weather breaks.
Okay.
My hope is that's what we can do. Getting the finances in place to do it has been a heck of a challenge.
Yeah.
I have a check that I can't cash.
That's amazing.
That's
So
crazy.
I just went from one problem to another. This is why you guys really need to read your fine print and talk to your insurance people beforehand of what can happen, not what you want to have happen. And you really need to think about your lenders, what their policies are, that kind of stuff. And you have to expect the unexpected. Just because you think, oh, this should be a simple process and everybody's going to do their job, that is not the case.
Sure.
They are in to look for any and every reason to make it hard.
Yep.
Mhm. That's the truth. Jeffrey, how was your new year to
So,
now?
I mean, I had a pretty busy and productive week. I did a lot of nonprofit work, but amongst all of that, there was a major windstorm that went through Edinburgh, and that is where my kayaks are stored out on my aunt's property.
Oh, no.
So my kayaks, my parents ended up putting their kayaks out there. So we've got 6 or 7 kayaks on this kayak rack that I built. And as we know, when I build something, it tends to last. Well, this windstorm, after it being out at this property for several years now, this windstorm took the rack and tipped it. Well, in tipping it, the top 2 kayaks went out into the pond. This isn't a small pond. In some states, this is considered a lake because of the size of it. So the pond has ice out on the center of it. I went out there New Year's Eve on my way to my parents' house for games and stuff, and stopped out there. I had to walk through a swamp. I was in sneakers. I did not prepare appropriately for this. And I'm looking at the kayaks. When we got notified of the storm, they were just along the shore, not a big deal. No, they were out there 20 to 30 feet. There's, even with her giant roof rake that she has, we could not reach the kayaks. So now I'm standing here going, how am I going to get these?
Sure.
And I just look over at the other kayaks. I look back at that. I'm like, it's only one option.
Oh, geez.
Going kayaking in winter. So I went and grabbed one of the other kayaks, flipped it over. It's got a mess inside, and I'm like, I'm not gonna sit down in this kayak. So I literally get the kayak onto the edge of the shore, and
He's going to paddleboard it out.
I literally stand out into it, kind of crouch a little bit with a oar, and my aunt goes, "Do you need help getting out?" I'm like, "No, I'm just," and I separate the paddles to push off, and she shoves the boat.
Okay.
And I'm like, I wasn't ready. So anyways, learned real quick that I have decent balance.
Good.
Because I did not fall in.
Good.
Also learned that just because you can't see ice does not mean that there isn't a layer of ice.
Yep.
And kayaks in ice cut through nicely in the direction they want to go,
Yes.
not the direction you want it to go.
Sure.
So I started getting sucked out towards the center of the pond, towards the thicker ice, and I'm taking the paddle and I'm trying to steer, and I just keep hitting ice. So I'm trying to break through the ice without rocking the kayak. Needless to say, I was able to get the 2 kayaks that were floating in the water back to shore, and it was weird because the way they fell out, somehow one ended up upside down on top of the other. So had we not got them before this next storm, they absolutely, at least one of them would have got sunk.
Sure.
So it was critical that we got it. But did all of this with totally inappropriate clothing on.
Yes.
Didn't even have a coat on that day.
Oh, dear.
So, it was fun. It worked.
Yeah.
Did stupid things. Did not get stupid prizes for
Thank
once.
goodness. Thank goodness.
There was absolutely talk and joke that I was going to be throwing my clothes in my parents' dryer when I got to their house.
Sure.
Luckily, that didn't happen. I was good to go.
Good.
So, spent the evening there doing games with them and some other friends and family before heading back home to do the actual ball drop with the kids. We did hot chocolate and s'mores because we got an indoor s'mores maker for Christmas.
Ooh, that's fun.
So we did s'mores and hot chocolate right before the ball drop, and then did the sparkling grape juice with the kids.
Nice.
So
Yeah. Samesies. We had a really nice family-oriented New Year's and all of that celebration. I think that probably, realistically speaking, it was a lot of very just family-oriented time. Just kind of kind of prioritizing. Played a lot of games, a lot of just. Kind of trying to make the best of the cold days and the cold and short days, if you will.
So we play a lot of games too. What is your favorite game that you play with your family currently?
So phase 10, left, center, right.
Okay.
Uno and Uno garbage.
Okay.
Those are our go-tos.
I'm not familiar with Uno garbage.
And then if I absolutely have the option, I'm a Settlers of Catan or Ticket to Ride guy.
Oh yeah, we do a lot of Tickets to Ride. We played Tripoli.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar
I'm
with
familiar with Tripoli.
that. Yep, we played Tripoli for New Year's Eve at my parents'.
That's awesome. So then I think the biggest piece that I want to make sure I share with everybody, we have a new YouTube video out where we got the winch mounted up to my cheap Jeep, and I'm having a ball with that right now. I'm out inappropriately winching things left and right because I can, and it's just kind of
As you should.
a fun, ridiculous little toy, and
I'm really
playing in the snow.
My steel cable's starting to fray in a few places, so I'm really leaning towards trying out that Bourne winch myself.
Yeah.
It looks like a pretty good winch.
Yeah, so far I'm happy. I want to talk to Bourne a little bit and get some specifics on it. and kind of just understand what their expectation of the winch is. But so far, it's been flawless for a mid-level priced winch at this point. So just having fun with it.
Daddy Jeep did Wii bowling for New Year's Eve. I feel like if Scott was going to do Wii bowling, that he would go get his bowling ball out and have it just sitting there.
Oh, jeez.
So
he'd have his bag sitting right next to it.
Yeah.
I see Justin Beto joined us late, and I do want to make sure we say hello to him because I know he always likes to get involved.
And then I'm not sure what Missing Remote was saying with bleeping, but
that's fine.
Maybe we said something inappropriate that needs bleeped out. I don't know.
Either way. We got Jeeps to build. We've got a busy week ahead of us. We're going to be talking more about fuel next week.
Yeah.
And we have that cool interview that you'll catch a part of as well. So make sure you check back in with us next week, and we'll see you then.